Yitz, what's the deal with these people?
Yeah, and they seem to be treated different than everyone else.
So just before we begin, a very important milestone to recognize. This week we passed the 10,000 views on our channel, and our channel is growing strong. So if you enjoy this video, make sure you like it. Feel free to comment on it. Feel free to share it with your friends. And also, if you haven't yet, please consider subscribing to the channel. This week, Yitzi, I want to discuss a very interesting point about one of the Shoftim, one of the tribes in Am Yisrael that we're all familiar with, the Shevet of Levi. Because this week's Parsha, the Torah tells us that Shevet Levi does not get any land to live on. And the Torah doesn't say it one time. It actually doubles down on that mitzvah, on that halacha. It says that they will not have any piece, any part, and no land to inherit. And then again, lo yelo nachalat, they will not have a land to give over to the children. And the big question about this is why? Why can't Shevet Levi have a piece of land? I understand the idea that their food has to come from Am Yisrael, as they are meant to be serving Am Yisrael. They need to build this connection, this social connection with Am Yisrael. They have to be dependent on them, just like Am Yisrael are dependent on the Leviim for the spiritual aspect of their life. I could understand that, the whole idea behind Matnot Kuna, behind Maasrot. But what's the idea about not giving the Leviim an actual piece of land to live on? And even more so, why does the Torah double down on this and make sure that the Levi does not have a piece of land to inherit and to live on in Eretz Yisrael?
Yeah, when you look at the psukim, it looks like it's saying the exact thing twice. It says the Leviim should not have a nachala, and a nachala the Leviim should not have. What is the pasuk actually trying to say? But I think these two psukim are actually presenting two sides that complete each other. Because as we know, Chazal teach us that the Kohanim, the Leviim, have a double role. On the one hand, they're shluchei didan. They're our representative, they're representing us. We're sending them to work and do our work within the Mikdash. But on the other hand, they're also shluchei derachmana. They're also representing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. When we come to the Mikdash, we don't see HaKadosh Baruch Hu with our own eyes, but we do see the Kohanim working there. We do see his representatives being there. So they have this sort of double role that they're constantly sort of bouncing between. And I think the first pasuk is really about their role as being shluchei derachmana, them representing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. As the pasuk says, they will not have a nachala. Why? Because Ishei Hashem v'nachalato yochelu, meaning they will be eating from God's nachala. They will be eating from his nachala, from the offerings brought to him, Ishei Hashem, which is an interesting idea. You know, when we think of it, we come and we bring an offering to the Mikdash. How do we bring something to HaKadosh Baruch Hu? Whether it's a korban, whether it's something else we're bringing to the Mikdash, we can't really give it to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. HaKadosh Baruch Hu doesn't really need our korbanot. What we do is we try to do his will. That's one sacrifice. We do it the way we're asked to. But we also end up bringing this korban and watching as the Kohanim, who represent HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the Mikdash, are eating from this korban. Remember, this is the piece that we can't touch. It's holy. It's something we've given away. It's not part of our regular physical world. We've elevated it. It's godly. But then who's eating it? Other human beings. So in that sense, they're representing HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And that's what the pasuk's saying. Why do they not get their nachala? Because I want them to represent my nachala. I want Am Yisrael to be able to bring me an offering, and they can't bring it to me, so they'll bring it to the Kohanim who represent me. And this is Ishei Hashem v'nachalato yochel. They're going to be eating his korbanot. They're going to be eating from his nachala. But then comes the second pasuk. If the first part was general, the Kohanim, the Levi'im, what they symbolize, what they represent, the second pasuk is individual. It's personal. Lo hiyeh lo. He won't have. And why won't he have? Hashem hu nachalato. Ka'asher diber lo. Because Hashem told him that he will be his nachala. It's not about him eating from HaKadosh Baruch Hu's nachala. It's about him not being focused on having his own possession and realizing that HaKadosh Baruch Hu is the greatest possession, so-called, he could possibly have. And I think these two are connected, because if you are going to be the one that when I come and bring my korban and I want to elevate myself from my physical world, and I want to bring something and elevate and bring it to something that's beyond this world, and I bring it to someone who, just like me, is focused on his own possessions and on what he's going to eat and what he's going to get in his own property, I didn't take this anywhere. It hasn't raised me up. The only way he could really fill that role of being the one I bring things to represent God, to represent me, not being focused on holding on to all my possessions, but being ready to would bring part of that as an offering to the Mikdash, to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, is if, first of all, he is ready to let go of his personal possessions and be focused on that role of representing HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and he's able to see HaKadosh Baruch Hu as his nachala. When he's able to fill that role, as the Pasuk says, Kasher diber lo, this is a special commandment for him that HaKadosh Baruch Hu commanded him. When he's able to fill that role, then he's able to fill the first role, which is intended for all of us, for helping all of us elevate our lives.
Beautiful. And I agree with what you're saying, because really when you look at Shevet Levi actually had two main jobs for Am Yisrael. One job was taking us upwards towards Kadosh Baruch Hu, towards Shemaim, towards Kedusha. The other job was taking the Kedusha, taking the Kadosh Baruch Hu and bringing him into this world, into this life, into our day-to-day life around us. And the interesting thing is really when you think about Shevet Levi and you talk to kids and you ask them, what was the job of Shevet Levi? Then they would probably tell you, Kohanim were there to bless Am Yisrael, to give the brachos to Am Yisrael, and also to bring the korbanos. And Shevet Levi's job was to play the music in Beis HaMikdash, to sing the songs in Beis HaMikdash. And that's basically where the job of Shevet Levi, the Kohanim, the Leviim, ends. However, when you actually know what their jobs were, when you look at the Rishonim, their job was way much greater than that. And also, when you look at this week's Parsha, a little bit after the Parsha of the Leviim, we find the Parsha of Otzeach Bishgaga, where somebody murders somebody by mistake, and he has to escape. He has to run quickly to find shelter in a shelter city, in a Ir Miklat. And the whole idea behind that Ir Miklat wasn't to get together all the criminals, all the murderers in Am Yisrael, like what happens today in modern prisons, but really, those Arei Miklat, the majority of the people in those Arei Miklat were not murderers. It was Shevet Levi. It was the Leviim, the people who during the year, 1 week a year, 2 weeks a year, would go work in Beis HaMikdash, but the rest of the time they would live in these Arei Miklat, in these cities, and part of their job was to be spread out Am Yisrael, in order to be out there in the fields and help Am Yisrael connect to HaKadosh Baruch Hu in the day-to-day life when they are far away from the Beis HaMikdash, and even when they're so far away spiritually that by mistake they ended up murdering somebody. And really, when you think about it, this is probably the main reason why Shevet Levi can't have a nachala, because home is a place where we set our roots, where we come from, where we feel most comfortable. And the so-called problem with a home could be that we feel too comfortable. And just like Moshe Rabbeinu actually warns Am Yisrael again and again throughout Sefer Devarim, that when you get home and you get to Eretz Yisrael, don't feel too comfortable, because once you start feeling too comfortable, that's when the disconnection from HaKadosh Baruch Hu begins to happen. That's when suddenly you start to say to yourself, I don't need HaKadosh Baruch Hu in my life. I don't need God there to help me. I can do it all by myself. As we discussed in Parshat Ekev last year, the whole idea behind the man was that Am Yisrael recognizes that they need HaKadosh Baruch Hu every single day, every single morning. So maybe the whole idea behind Shevet Levi not having a home is to make sure that it's actually engraved in their hearts, the relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu, that they never feel comfortable. No matter where they are, they will always remember that everything is temporary, that everything can change, and everything is in the hands of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, and your presence in this world should be always connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And it's not only about the land, it's also in the name of Shevet Levi, as it's brought down many times in Sifrei Chasidut. The whole idea behind Shevet Levi, behind Leah calling Levi Apami Lavei Ishi Elai, is the idea of accompanying somebody. And Shevet Levi, their job was to accompany Am Yisrael in order to bring Am Yisrael towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu, in order to connect Am Yisrael. That's the whole idea behind singing that connects people. It goes deeper again in the Sifrei Chasidut. But the idea behind Shevet Levi is to be there not only to represent us in front of HaKadosh Baruch Hu, but also to remind us on a daily basis that connection, that relationship with Hashem. And as part of that, the base of that relationship is Shevet Levi themselves not having their land, but HaKadosh Baruch Hu being their land, as the Torah says in this week's Parsha.
You know, this is very similar to Am Yisrael. We know HaKadosh Baruch Hu says, V'atem tiyu li mamlechet kohanim. In a certain sense, the same relationship there is between Kohanim and Am Yisrael, between the Leviim and Am Yisrael, is the same there is between Am Yisrael's role in the world. And we know also by us, we have this concept of Einei Hashem Elokecha ba, where Eretz Yisrael, as opposed to what's described about Mitzrayim, which has everything and doesn't need rain and is beautiful, we're lucky to not be like that. We're Einei Hashem Elokecha ba, we're going to have to daven for rain. It's not going to come easy. So in a certain sense, also, you know, we don't have that, as you were saying, privilege to feel comfortable. We need to keep looking up to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, davening for rain. That instability that builds that relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu is maybe our lack of nachala, or our nachala being the nachala of HaKadosh Baruch Hu. And this is because also we have that role as Am Yisrael. It's not about us only. It's not about our relationship with HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's about influencing the world. It's about inspiring others. It's about bringing the whole world closer to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. Just as the Leviim, as you were saying, accompany us and bring us closer, we're supposed to help and bring the entire world with us towards HaKadosh Baruch Hu. and so they don't have a nachala because their nachala is Hashem, and our nachala is not really a nachala, it's really the eretz of Hashem, it's the nachala of Hashem, and together we can really fill our roles within the world.
Amen. And like you were saying, this job of being Shevet Levi comes with an instability, a job that all of us, Am Yisrael, takes towards the world. It brings some instability with it, and we have to get comfortable with the instability. And the way to get comfortable with instability is to stay connected to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, which reminds me of a cute Hasidic story that's brought down in Rav Zevin's book, Sipurei Hasidim, about one of the rabbis that is Hasidim were sure that he does moftim, he does miracles, because in the morning, early in the morning, when he goes down to the mikveh is down a slippery hill, he never slips. He always manages to get down to mikveh, even in his old age. And the Hasidim were always so excited about it. And one time came a Litvak, a guy who did not believe in the moftim and the miracles of the Rebbe, and said, oh, there's no way this Rebbe does miracles. Let me prove to you. And he tries to go down, and every single second he slips and he falls, and he tries to get up and he falls again. And every time he falls until he tumbles and rolls all the way down. And the Hasidim saw that and started dancing and getting excited. The Rebbe heard about the excitement from the Hasidim. He goes out and he asks, what's going on? Why are you so excited? So the Hasidim had to tell him that really, the Rebbe, you are a Baal Moftim. You do miracles because you never fall when you go down the hill. And this young guy who tried to prove us wrong, he actually ended up rolling all the way down the hill. So this was the best evidence that you are actually a miracle doer. And the Rebbe looked at them and shook his head and he said, no, you got this all wrong. The only difference between me and that young fellow is our connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. I have a connection to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. It's a string that pulls me up and holds me up. So when I walk down the hill, I have something holding me from behind, holding me on top, making sure that I don't fall. But this young fellow, he had nothing holding him, and that's why when come instability, when something shakes him up, he falls all the way down. But we're out of time, and there's definitely a lot more to talk about in this topic, but we'll end with that.
Beautiful. Shkoyach. Shabbat Shalom.
Shkoyach to you, Shabbat Shalom, and again, we'll talk again next week. More Talking Torah videos on different topics. Check out our YouTube channel.